The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Welcome to BronxTalk. Question, do you like the installation of muni meters in your neighborhood and eventually every neighborhood in the city of New York? Another question, what's the condition of the roads and streets in your community? How's the street lighting? Can we afford a new Tappan Zee bridge? Are bridge tolls going up? Many questions like that and more about traffic, roads, and transportation. They're all on the table tonight as we welcome back to BronxTalk the AAA's Manager of Media Relations, Robert Sinclair Jr. Nice to have you again.
Good to be back.
We used to say, let's go to the roads with Robert Sinclair
That's
when we
right.
had our other TV shows.
The good old days.
That's what we're doing tonight. Let's start with the first question I asked, and that is about muni meters. You like it? Is this a good innovation in the city of New York?
Well, part of the problem, I think, with muni meters is the fact that people have to run halfway down the block to put the money, get the little ticket, and in the time that they're gone, especially if a meter is broken, you have to run farther, and you know the agent can be on you giving you a ticket in the time that you're gone. So that's one problem that exists with them. And I've noticed that you have them outside the building here now,
neighborhood, yeah.
You know, till 10 p.m. I just was fortunate I brought enough change along.
Although you can, see, I mean, this is the convenience of it. You can use a credit card or you can use bills and things like that. You don't have to fish for change or run into the deli and try and find a change of a quarter. And I should amend what you said because I believe the city council has a bill that says within the first 5 minutes they can't write a ticket. You know, if you're in that kind of no man's land.
How do they know? How do they know that you're down the block trying to get the ticket?
Is this an innovation based on kind of new innovations in other places or other people doing muni meters, or is this really a New York City invention?
I was in Philadelphia recently, and they've got the same kind of thing there. So without a doubt, it's something that's sweeping the nation, as are many other so-called intelligent transportation systems, you know, where they're going to be able to tie your cell phone, believe it or not, tie a cell phone into a traffic signal, which will also tie into the vehicle and let the driver know that there's somebody, perhaps a wayward pedestrian, that's about to cross in front of you and activate the vehicle system's brakes.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
that's
on the right. Oh yeah, that's on the right.
So there's a signal that ties your cell phone to a street light,
a traffic light,
right, to something in your automobile that tells you there's somebody in front of you?
That's right. They might be walking down the block and you've got the green, they've got the red, but they're distracted and the signal goes to the light and then goes to you and it can activate the brakes in your car. Yeah, there was a demonstration at the auto show, not last year, in fact the year before. You know, we're moving along. These are intelligent transportation systems.
Is this the sort of innovation that, to me, it would sound like it's yet taking the wheel out of drivers' hands?
Absolutely. Why don't we just teach people how to drive properly, and we wouldn't need all these things that cede responsibility to the car and to the electronics and take it away from the driver. I once read a comment by one writer. He said that the more we do to make cars idiot-proof, the more we do to make drivers idiots.
And you see evidence of that, I guess, in your work?
Every day. I mean, and besides that, the equipment that they're putting in the vehicle, I told you I'm test driving a vehicle now, and it's got a button on it for apps. And it'll let you tie into the internet through the vehicle. And I was just pushing buttons, experimenting, see what would happen when I did it. And it said, do you want to tie in an internet device, an internet-ready device now? No, I'm driving. You know, I want to concentrate on driving. And unfortunately, that's a trend that I see that's happening with more and more vehicles.
So it would tie into some sort of device, whether it be a GPS device or something else.
Smartphone,
or something like that.
And then you can access internet via the navigation screen that's in the vehicle. Now, the manufacturers will tell you that any dangers of distractions are mitigated by the fact that there are voice prompts but it's probably about 60 or 70 pages in a vehicle's manual that you have to study to learn how to do this.
Well, just going back to the Muni meter before we get to, we have many other topics. And folks, if you have something about your neighborhood or something you're curious about in the roads, this is the guy to ask. So don't hesitate to use the phone number and call in. I just had a situation where I did what I was supposed to do, put the coins in, put the thing in, and then I went to the back seat to get something out of my back seat, and without realizing it, because it was kind of a breezy day, the thing flipped over. No, it flipped over. So when I came back, I got a ticket, and the ticket said, not properly displayed, even though I could certainly verify that I bought it in the time and the place. Do you think I'm going to get off? Obviously, I sent the copy of the
You might
ticket.
get a reduction in the fine, but I doubt that you're going to get off. Yeah, the city is making $600 million a year from parking violations, and that's a revenue stream that they're not going to easily give up.
So sum total, do you or the AAA hear from drivers about Muni meters, that they like them or don't like them? I mean, the convenience, one of them is what we've already said. You can use a credit card, you can pay with bills, you can do those kinds of things.
The complaint that we got is that corresponding with these Muni meters going in is a rise in the parking rates. It's 25
cents. It makes it easy to raise the rates.
Exactly. Anytime they get ready to do that, it'll be very easy. Rather than going around to individual meters and changing the timing, they could probably, I don't even know if they have to go to the machine to do it. They might be able to do it remotely.
Centrally, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they would, because you can collect money a lot easier with these things.
Sure.
And of course, now there's a lot of talk because, and I wasn't even aware you weren't allowed to, like if you put in for an hour and you do a half hour in one spot and then go to another spot, supposedly you're supposed to put more money in.
Right. Well, the problem was that people were going from one set of rates, like in Queens, and driving to Manhattan with those tickets and trying to use them in Manhattan where the rates are higher. So that tends to make a little bit of sense. That is a little bit of fraud. But, very often if I haven't used up all the time and I've got the ticket, I'll give it to the next driver that's coming along. Here, take it.
You give it to the next guy.
Like you used to be able to get money on the meter. If you parked and there was still money on the meter, you'd have that. But now with this system, that doesn't happen in the cities making money each and every time somebody parks.
Yeah, I will tell you, if you're in the Bronx and going to Manhattan or Queens and going to Manhattan, you had to have put a lot of money in in order to, the way traffic is going over the Triborough or wherever.
At the time.
Let's talk a little bit about another kind of automated thing. And I wanted to help you folks promote the new Car and Travel magazine, which is a wonderful magazine that is put out by the AAA. And if you're a member, you get this. And
Great story on Greece in there. And
on Greece, so it's not only local stuff. You find about travel.
Yeah, travel. Something about Easy Pass.
But there was an interesting, I believe it was, we read together, this idea of the red lights and this automatic cameras and all those things.
Right.
Does the AAA believe that more cameras are a good thing because, frankly, it is a deterrent, and if you suspect there might be a camera, then you're maybe less likely to run the light?
I'm glad you asked this question, because just last week, Wednesday and Thursday, I was out timing yellow lights on red light cameras.
What an interesting job.
Yeah,
Robert
but just sit around looking at red lights, lights change from green to yellow to red. We are in favor of red light cameras because the nature of the crash that happens when somebody runs a red light is very dangerous. A T-bone, somebody running into the side of a vehicle, the weakest part of a vehicle. But there are engineering considerations that must be provided with the timing of the lights. The amber times is critical. The amber time has to be set for the prevailing rate of speed on that roadway, not the speed limit. You have to go out with the radar gun and take a reading
and be
of the
realistic, because
realist
on
about
city
what the
streets,
speeds
if the limit is 35, but people really do travel 40, let's say on Pelham Parkway, for instance.
Pelham Parkway, Rockaway Boulevard, next to the airport in
Grand
Queens,
Concourse.
people are doing at least 50 over there, right? But it seems that all the timing on New York City's lights are either 3 or 4 seconds, period. And according to transportation engineers, depending on the speed, like if you're upwards of 40 miles an hour, that yellow timing needs to be 4.5 seconds, sometimes 5 seconds, and it also depends on the width of the intersection, because a person has to have an opportunity to get across the intersection. So one of those big intersections, like you might have over here, I guess, at the Grand Concourse or something like that. They're a lot wider than the conventional intersection. They might be 150 feet wide. So you need to have that time to get across, because otherwise, if that yellow is too quick, that person gets to that go, no-go decision, and they're worried about getting that red light ticket because the yellow is too short. They jam on the brakes, and they get rear-ended. So it winds up creating a safety problem and also just becomes a revenue enhancement item.
And, well, I want to talk about the notion of revenue enhancement. So what you're saying is, rather than kind of be, gee whiz, we can do this and generate revenue, so let's just put another 200 cameras up, you're saying it's got to be done much more carefully and with a little more of this in mind.
Much more fairly and with safety in mind and with up-to-date equipment. New York City's red light program began in the late 90s. There hasn't been, as far as we know, an upgrade to the equipment. So using this antiquated equipment, and we compare that with, for example, Nassau and Suffolk, which just a couple years ago integrated red light programs, and their equipment is all state-of-the-art. There's video along with the still shots, and their yellow lights vary. I counted when I was out in Nassau and Suffolk County, in addition to Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, and some yellow lights in Nassau County upwards of 5.5 seconds long.
And that you approve of
Absolutely.
Because it's a little more realistic.
Yeah, then it becomes a safety item and not just a revenue enhancement item.
I have so many other questions, but the chair of the City Council's Transportation Committee is a Bronx council member, Councilman Jim Vacca, and he is watching, I'm happy to say, and he called into the show.
We love him.
So, well,
He's a good man.
There's a vote of confidence. So we say good evening to our friend, Council Member Jim Vacca. How are you, Council Member?
Hi, how are you, and how are you, Mrs. Sinclair?
I'm very well, Councilman. Good to hear you.
So what do you got? What's interesting to you?
I'm very interested in all these things, of course, and I want to thank Mrs. Sinclair and his organization for the fine work they do in advocating for safe driving. And it comes in so many different shapes and forms. I do have to tell the people watching that New York City raises about $600 million a year in parking and related summonses. So to say that somehow parking summonses have become a way for the city to raise revenue and some type of a cash cow, I don't think it's far off the mark. But with that said, we in the council are working very hard with Mr. Sinclair and his organization, because they come to so many of our hearings with such great input for legislative ideas. And we're trying to rein in some of the gotcha tickets and some of the unfair tickets that are given.
Can you got an example off the top of your head?
Well, the muni meters represent a problem for us right now. Within 1 year, all of New York City will have muni meters. Yet, as Mrs. Sinclair was talking about, when you have extra time on the muni meter, that time is lost. It used to be when you had a meter, there was extra time, the next driver got it. So I've introduced a bill that would allow a driver to take that muni meter receipt and to use the extra time at their next shopping location. That time is money that the motorist bought. Why can't the motorist use it? Right. The other thing is, muni meters have now taken up entire blocks, and there were often parking spaces, even on the most residential even on the most commercial of strips, where there were residential houses on that strip, and there were spaces that were not regulated.
Oh, so now they've taken the whole block.
And we're looking at that because people are getting summonses where there were no meters before, but now if they're on a block where there are muni meters at all, those spaces are included by the traffic enforcement agents.
Mm-hmm. Do you get Councilman, do you get a lot of pushback from the city when it comes to these revenue or so-called revenue generating items that the city is like, you know what, we can't do that because frankly we'll lose money or we need to make more money on these things?
Oh, they're always looking to make more money. I mean, I'm sure your people realize that until 4 days ago, if you got a traffic ticket and you wanted to, and you could not take a day off from work, you were allowed to plead over in the computer, on the internet. You could plead, and if you pled guilty on the internet, save the city the cost of the administrative judge hearing your case. You were then given a reduced fine. You pled. Well, effective January 31st, that right no longer exists. You take a day off from work, you go fight the ticket. If you don't take a day off from work and don't fight the ticket, you're found guilty.
Wow.
So you could, if you're charged with murder, burglary, or robbery, you can plea deal. You can't plea deal a traffic ticket in the
ticket.
city of New York any longer.
Councilman, before we let you go, are there any highway or road safety items that you wanted to mention before we let you go?
Well, I think Mr. Sinclair and I and his organization are on the same page. I think people drive too fast. We have to slow down the speed of cars, especially on residential streets, on thoroughfares like the Grand Concourse, but on side streets at all. It's probably the biggest complaint I get is the speed of cars, and by installing speed bumps and countdown clocks and a whole bunch of other measures, we have to make it safer for the pedestrian and the driver. And I do think that speeding has got to come on our radar, and I can't begin to tell you that people have to understand that too often they are part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
Interesting, right, and all the complaining that people do. Councilmember, nice to have you with us tonight. I appreciate you calling in, and we'll see you around town, I'm sure.
Say hello, Mrs. Sinclair. Nice seeing you again.
Hello. Good to hear you.
So what do you think of the things that he said?
It makes a lot of sense. You know, interesting, you mentioned speeding and radar. Radar can only be used on highways in the city of New York.
Really?
To determine if someone is speeding. If a police officer is making an observation of a speeder, it is only through observation that they can get a ticket, and as such, the person has to be doing at least 20 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Really?
So, yeah, if then the speed limit is 30, so the person has to be doing 50. You know, and you know, they have to be able to recognize it by sight. They're not generally using radar on city streets, just on the highways.
For example, like Pelham Parkway,
right.
or
yeah,
again, the
they
Grand Concourse,
might be, on something like that, but like on a regular, normal, perhaps residential street.
In September, we almost got a rather draconian increase in tolls on our bridges, and that was a move made by the Port Authority
almost.
of New Jersey. I thought it was turned down. I mean, they had a series of hearings. I guess my Easy Pass, I'm not checking the bill. I better take a look.
Yeah.
So where are we at as far as the tolls? And I know that AAA has been very strong in fighting the Port Authority on this.
I could speak probably for an hour about the Port Authority and our lawsuit against them. And you mentioned the hearings. All the hearings happened at either 8 a.m. or 6 p.m. on the same day when everybody would be either driving to or from work, the people that would be affected. And none of the top brass were at the hearing. Any of the hearings that were held.
Top brass of the Port Authority.
Oh, the Port Authority, yeah. So it was very perfunctory, the process, and went through very quickly. And not just one toll hike was approved, but 5 all at one time. So we'd be seeing a steady increase in the tolls up until 2015. It's bad enough for the motorists because it went from $8 cash to $12, and now I believe it's up to $9.50 if you use your Easy Pass.
On the, let's say, the East River bridges?
No, this is Port Authority handles the interstate facilities between New York and New Jersey.
Sure.
So, and you have to have a Port Authority Easy Pass in order to get the Easy Pass discount. If your pass is from the MTA, or if I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's what the MTA is doing, and that's what the Turnpike Authority and the Garden State Parkway are doing.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of people, they're not getting the discount if they're from out of town.
That seems rather strange. One would think if you have Easy Pass, you should share equally in the...
Well, you could conceivably drive from Maine all the way to Florida, west to Indiana using Easy Pass, and there's something called the intergovernmental agency body of all these government entities that operate Easy Pass in these areas, and all of them, except the MTA, the Garden State Parkway, the New York Bridge Authority, and the New Jersey Turnpike, give a discount to Easy Pass users who have a non-entity, an Easy Pass from a different entity. Yeah.
Non-resident entity or something like that.
Right.
Let's go back to the lawsuit. So now why is the AAA suing? I realize nobody seems to like the increase in tolls, but what's out there?
In all its public pronouncements, the minutes of a board meeting about the toll hike, and in a press release, the Port Authority said they needed the money for rebuilding the World Trade Center. And as a result of a lawsuit in 1989 that we sued the Port Authority because they wanted to use toll money for the path, the judge issued a decision, and that decision becomes law, that says that tolls have to be used for facilities that have a close relation to a functional relationship to transportation. Well, the World Trade Center has no relationship to transportation.
Well, other than the fact that there's a transportation hub below.
There's a subway down below.
I'm sure
the path
that's
is
the answer you're getting back.
Yeah, well, you know, the world's most expensive office building, which only has a path station at the bottom, being paid for by toll users, we don't think is fair. And in addition, there's a glut of office space in Lower Manhattan, so they're having a tough time getting tenants. So far, they've got the China Center, they've got Condé Nast, and they've got some law firm I just heard last week that's going in there. So in essence, the toll payers are subsidizing these companies by helping to offset the cost of their rent. So, you know, here's an entity whose facilities are at least 80 years old. The George Washington Bridge is the youngest of their facilities.
That's remarkable.
At 80, you know, Gothel's Bridge, Bayonne Bridge, built in 1928, 1929, completed in those years. You know, we need new bridges, we need new tunnels, and there are plenty of people lined up to use them with money in their hand.
What is the status of that lawsuit? And are you looking to have the tolls redacted, or are you really looking for, well, what's done is done, but we want that money applied in a different way?
No, we were looking to have the tolls rolled back. We sought a preliminary injunction. Today, the Judge Hallwell, said that was denied, meaning that the tolls would not be rolled back immediately, citing that there was no irreparable harm. Mainly on the fact that people who are paying these extra tolls, if the tolls are rolled back as a result of the whole decision, could be paid back. They could get refunds because something like 79% are using Easy Pass, and discounts could be offered to cash users. But the case goes on.
So the second part of it is the part that I asked you about,
right.
And that is, can you get the monies now applied to something else, maybe more specifically for roads and bridges and things like that?
We could in the future if the judge decides in our favor. Now, what happens now is another discovery process. When we were preparing the lawsuit originally, we did not have a capital plan from the Port Authority. We submitted a Freedom of Information Law request for the capital plan. They said there was none. Now, in its response to our lawsuit, they've issued all sorts of financial documents that we can now examine to see if the monies that are going to the Trade Center or to the transportation network.
Is there any way to tell when you expect a resolve, or this is going to be one of those things that's just...
Our arguments were back in December, and we just got this
so we will have
to
wait and see and keep our eyes and ears to the ground. Let's talk about the conditions of roads. Now, you did a rather exhaustive study called the Lights Out study about lights in roads. And despite other issues with the Cross Bronx and some other roadways, you got some good results out of that.
Yeah, to their credit, the city DOT has done a masterful job in putting the lights back in. There were something like 46% outage rate on the Cross Bronx Expressway, and there were no lights at all on the Alexander Hamilton Bridge, that portion of the Cross Bronx that crosses the river. So, you know, they've done a great job, but the problems with the Cross Bronx remain. It is an old, outdated roadway that does not meet modern transportation standards. It's too hilly, the lanes are too narrow, there's no breakdown lane, the turn radii are too tight, and you've got a lot of trucks using them, so it's always congested and getting torn up.
We did a show with a couple of community activists who are putting together kind of an advocacy to help improve the Cross Bronx, mostly to study it to start and see what ways it could be improved, whether sections could be covered over or, frankly, who knows what.
Yeah.
There's never been any hope out there that something could be done with the Cross Bronx. Have you folks had any thoughts about, or say, gee, if only we could, you know, X, Y, or Z and improve it, or it's really a very difficult problem? Very
difficult. It's going to take an enormous amount of money to rebuild the Cross Bronx Expressway, and we need a new Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. We need a new Gowanus Expressway, and it just doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon.
Condition of roads better, worse? I know we haven't had a terrible winter, so I would think we haven't had the kind of potholes that you get from snowstorms.
Mother Nature has been kind to the city DOT this winter, and that's the only reason the roads are in somewhat decent shape. But there's still plenty of bad pavement conditions out there. There are still potholes. We don't have the bumper crop of potholes that we had last year, a result of all the freeze and thaws and snows and precipitation.
Right.
So we got a little bit of a break. So going into
at least
the spring,
so far.
So far, yeah, it's only February.
Just going back to the lights. it seems so logical that you would have solar-powered light fixtures as opposed to electronic light fixtures. Is there a movement to do things like that, to start greening our roadways? And if so, of course, I guess you'd need to allocate money for it,
Yeah,
et cetera, et cetera.
maybe in the rest of the country. When you travel in the rest of the country, probably if you get out of the Northeast, you start seeing transportation engineering as it should be, with the roads well marked and guardrails and lots of room by the side of the road and wider lanes and the reflectorized coatings on the lines and what have you. It's very tough because of the fact that we are dealing with infrastructure that's very old in our area, that dates back to the 1930s and 40s. The service life is long past due. And without major upgrades like big dig style projects like they had in the Bronx, we're going to keep suffering with the problems that we have.
One of the big projects, and if you look at the time frame, would be the Tappan Zee Bridge. And as I understood it when I was a kid, we talked about it being a 50-year lifespan.
Right.
That 50 years is up, and there's no question that the bridge is not in the great shape that we'd like it to be in.
Right.
How do you get, the price tag that the governor has been talking about is $6 billion. Are you hopeful that there will be a new Tappan Zee? Give me the whole range of possibilities up there.
Well, recently the Obama administration put the Tappan Zee Bridge on fast track, meaning you don't need all of these preliminary studies and what have you, shovel-ready things in order to get the money. But, whatever money the federal government might put up has to be matched or exceeded by money we get locally. They were talking about a 3P deal, a public-private partnership, where some entity might come along and help finance the construction of the bridge and then have the ability to get some revenue from it once tolls started being collected. A significant deadline passed last week where it was bid out for any companies that would, put a bid on the construction of the bridge and to determine what they would charge to do it. Nobody submitted a bid.
Are you optimistic? You've been in this business too long to be optimistic. I think that's what I'm reading your face.
Yeah, it's really tough. Where do you find the money? And if we did find the money, there would probably have to be a toll increase, not only on the Tappan Zee, but the entire thruway.
Sure. And also, of course, by the time they actually got it built, that $6 billion would turn into $9 or $12 billion. I don't think there's any question. Yeah. Before we let you go, AAA has wonderful services. And there's every reason that people should be members. I'll give you a chance to promote the AAA and become a member. AAANY.com.
Go there and get lots of information. We are also the nation's largest leisure travel agency, so if you're looking to book a trip, especially a cruise, don't worry about that Costa Concordia thing. That doesn't happen around. That's very, very rare. So it's a good way to do that. And we're also in the insurance business now. We're doing insurance and
for auto insurance?
Auto, life, and home. And they're doing insurance tips in a magazine, and you would be surprised at some of the vulnerabilities that people have as relates to insurance. I'll give you a quick one. Underinsured motorist provision of the policy might cost you an extra $25 to get $500,000 worth of coverage. You should get it because people in your household are covered by that.
Whenever Suzanne and I travel, she always says, make sure you tell the hotel you have the AAA discount, and it saves a fortune.
Yeah.
Robert Sinclair, always a pleasure and always issues, and we hope you'll come back at some point.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
If you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com. We'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of the show are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. You can see everything that we've done. Upcoming now, next week, a leading parks advocate will talk about the new golf course, an old golf course, parks funding or the lack of it, proposed skating rink, and a number of other issues. On the 20th, a fun show with the Super Bowl now over, yay Giants. It's time for baseball, and we'll talk with the Bronx Museum about an exciting Bronx baseball exhibit. And please make note, Borough President will be our guest on February 27th. March 6th, is that? March 5th? Whatever that Monday, I think it's the 5th. The IBO will be with us to analyze the required payments to improve Bronx parks that have or have not been paid. A lot to do. Bronx Talk every Monday night. Thanks to Jane and to Michael and to Dina and to the crew and to you and to me. Good night.